Welcome to the special meeting of the Glendale City Council. May we have roll call?
Council members Brotman.
Here.
Garpetian.
Here.
Kasakian.
Here.
Najarian. Here. Mayor Asadrian.
Here. May we have your report?
The agenda for the Tuesday, March 18th, 2025 special public meeting of the City Council is posted on March 14, 2025 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
What's next?
Item number 1, community development. Regarding community development draft 3 to 5 year action plan. A motion to provide direction regarding potential initiatives and programs to be included in the community development department 3 to 5 year action plan.
All right. Mr. Calvert?
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. What we bring before you today is essentially what we were referring to as a draft action plan for the department. We're aiming for a 3 to 5 year vision. In the past couple of years, we have seen the staffing level stabilize in community development. Almost all of our positions are full. We have seen our timelines start to reduce when it comes to permitting and entitlements. And we believe this is a good time for us to start being more proactive rather than reactive, which is where we've had to be for a number of years, largely because of staffing, catching up. Some of it was a leftover from the pandemic, but also kind of shifting course and direction. That doesn't mean that everything is done. You've seen us come before you on several occasions, including some of our process improvements for the permitting and entitlement process. Those are things that are still going. Those are things that will still be included as part of our action plan at a later date, the final version that will highlight the work that is ongoing, that has already been set in place. What we're bringing forward today is a series of essentially recommendations of future-looking programs. What I've asked of the division heads across the department is to give me some of their ideas on what they think we could be working on, what we should be working on. There's some things that we really have to do regardless that we believe will supplement the kind of ongoing operations today, but also things that are important to this council, important to the community, but also things that we just have to be doing anyways. So the way this is structured, again, kind of a 3 to 5 year vision, we'll kind of firm that up based on the feedback that we received from council today. These are major potential initiatives. We're seeking some input from the council here on terms of timing. What you'll see at the end of your PowerPoint is essentially we kind of color-coded these to try to help the council make a decision, but also where it sits in terms of kind of a near, mid, and longer term time frame in terms of those 3 to 5 year, that 3 to 5 year window. I will say that we're not determining the parameters of each of these programs. What would happen is if council did give us the direction to move forward with a number of these, all of these, any additional ones that you may want to include, we would come back at the onset of those programs to discuss those parameters, how we would launch those, how they would impact financially. We don't include exact dollar amounts in here, and we don't include exact number of staffing that would be needed. I think it would be a bit irresponsible for us to walk in and say, I need X number of positions and X number of dollars today, when there's still a number of things that need to be figured out. Depending on the feedback we get from council, there could be some overlap in terms of efficiency in staff and efficiency on money. So what you'll kind of see at the bottom of each of these proposed initiatives is almost like a dollar menu or a dollar symbol, if you will, that you would see on a restaurant. Is it expensive? Is it inexpensive? Things of that nature. What we would do is, depending on that timing, come back at the beginning of each fiscal year as part of that budget to have that discussion and how that would fit into that fiscal year's budget. Ultimately, we see it's our responsibility to figure out how we're going to pay for that and how we're going to make that revenue to offset the needs of staffing, but also where we can get funds. Some of these things could be grant funded as well. So it may not necessarily be an ask for dollars at a later date if we can be creative and identify those. The goals of a lot of these are to reduce timelines, again, permitting, entitlements, enhance our communications and engagement. We've essentially launched a communications division within that department, recognizing some of the needs we have in terms of better public engagement, getting out in front of some of the narratives for clarity, for information purposes, how we bring the public into the fold in terms of these conversations. Increase economic activity, obviously promote operational efficiency. You'll see in a handful of these, there's a little star in the corner. Those are things that we indicate a program that's really going to be required, or maybe it's related to things like safety. You'll see a seismic retrofit is one of those. These are things that we do see as more urgent, and you'll see that reflected at the end of this PowerPoint, where those are kind of highlighted in green. That's the near-term initiatives, the orange kind of midterm, and the red is a little bit longer term. So with that being said, the way this is set up, we'll go through division by division, give a quick recap on what that division is responsible for, and then what we are proposing to include in our action plan. So the first up would be administration. This is the group essentially where communications has folded into that. They are responsible for our department's budgeting, personnel management, customer service, also for managing the successor agency and the Alex Theater. With this group, we're proposing enhancing our communications in general. We know that there's been some gaps, some weaknesses. We rely a lot on third-party work. Our consultants often, when we look at things like our general plan updates or maybe the vertigo wash, where we need to have enhanced communication services, hence why we brought in a communications manager and another staff member that's part of that. We need to enhance our digital platform. We're already looking at alternatives on how we can engage better with the public, some of the alternatives that, or some of the options and websites that other cities use that would make us a little more accessible, if you will, clear with the information, how we boost our social media and advertising so that we are reaching a larger audience than we were before, better translation services, better public engagement tools. So we would ultimately be seeking some financial support, obviously for some of these services, but also looking to add staffing in the future. And really from the administration group, that is the primary ask or inclusion that we would have in this action plan. Looking at our building and safety division, this is the group that's responsible for building code compliance, plan review and check, our express permit system, issuing standard plans. We recently launched our standard ADU plans. We have one up there now. We're continuing to add to that portfolio, and we're obviously looking for any designers that may be willing to participate in that program. That was something that was required by the state, part of our housing element as well. We also offer specialty services, whether that's the express service itself, ADA compliance checks, things of that nature. And they're one of the three groups that are really responsible for our permit counter, where we see everything from neighborhood services to planning to building and safety, and then other departments as well who are issuing guidance and information to our applicants. As part of that, and as I noted earlier, the seismic retrofit program is going to be a very, very important one that we move forward with. We need to reinforce aging buildings. It's estimated we have over 1,000 soft-story apartment buildings in the city that could be in danger of collapsing, pancaking essentially from a major earthquake event. So obviously that will increase safety, but it will also generate revenue from the city from a permit perspective. This is one of those programs that we very well likely could find ourselves pursuing grants to help fund. We just saw Santa Monica received a very large dollar amount to help assist both the city in terms of this process, but also those that need to retrofit their buildings themselves. This is something that would require additional staffing, and depending on that staffing and when that staffing came, it could also require the assistance of an outside third-party consultant to help us assess which properties, which buildings would need this. That could help supplement or reduce the number of staff that we would need. It could be a combination, but this is one of those things that we would recommend putting forward as a near-term action plan item, if you will. Another is our tenant improvement fast track that we were proposing. Right now, we are piloting a 5-day turnaround for tenant improvements. We recognize the importance of getting businesses into their spaces as quickly as possible. We're currently doing this with a number of kind of retail tenant improvements. It's not something that we would necessarily do with projects that would require, say, HVAC mechanical improvements or fire. But if it's a simple tenant improvement, we're moving walls, some electrical work, no outside work, no changes to the facade, we believe that we could turn that around in a 2-day window. With that, we would not need additional funding, but we would need additional staffing ultimately to move that forward. This is something that maybe as we kind of flesh out the 5-day pilot program, that maybe we would see the following fiscal year. We would also like to see if whether or not if we did additional staffing for the seismic retrofit, would that additional staffing assist in this process as well? So that kind of goes to the point where we didn't want to peg a specific number of staff for each of these programs because there may be overlap in some of those where we could seek some efficiencies. On to our economic development division. With this, their core functions, really helping to grow our retail and entertainment sectors, our tech sector, which is a key component of our economy. Small business support has been crucial, obviously, and we have seen programs such as the Small Business Summit really kind of take off. We're about to enter into our third year here. Promotional plug, that's on May 1st for anyone who's interested in attending. Tourism and hospitality, really trying to boost visitors to the Glendale region, especially with major events that are coming up. We are an international city. There's opportunities for us to kind of capture visitors to the LA region to come and spend a day here in Glendale. We've been active in that with our Visit Widget app. We've been advertising in the Los Angeles Lakers yearbook, which has seen additional traffic coming to our city website, coming to our Choose Glendale website to see what we're about. And partnering with some of our local retailers or local organizations such as DGA, the Americana, and the Galleria to be able to analyze that data and see what kind of traffic we're driving. We're also looking at foreign direct investment, and then our business concierge program lives within that economic development group. So as part of those upcoming programs, foreign direct investment, really intended here to promote Glendale to foreign-based companies. We participate in the Select USA Summit in Washington, D.C. each year, really seeking those opportunities where companies who are trying to find an opportunity to get into the U.S. market or open up a location here in the U.S. to encourage them to do that here. With that would require some additional efforts, though, than just essentially attending one conference. We could do things like trade missions, really enhancing our sister city relationships so that it's not just about diplomacy or friendship, but it's about driving economic activity, economic success, increasing exports. And as part of this, we would need the assistance of a third-party consultant, essentially to help us do the analysis on which kind of sectors or which kind of locations, countries would we be targeting. That would be really based off of what we see here in the local or in the Los Angeles region in general. It's a relatively modest expense in terms of bringing in that third-party consultant, though it could bring along other expenses if we do things like trade missions. Small business assistance, this is something that's come up in discussions here in City Council, things that have been asked of us to kind of take a look into. This would be a little more of an expensive program. If you recall, we had used to offer one a number of years back where we were offering small grants to restaurants to maybe do a hood upgrade, things of that nature. It would be revisiting a program such as that. Physical improvements for a business, operating expenses potentially, or business development. We would recommend that this would ultimately involve a third-party consultant to make sure that that kind of program would stay biased. We would want to look at things like the size of the company or the size of the revenue to essentially justify the need to support or assist. We heard the discussion a little bit earlier on the rental subsidy. It's something a little similar to that, if you will. Could be a pilot program that we launch where we set those parameters at a later date of who is it that we would like to assist in their growth or stabilization within Glendale. It could be a very heavy lift, but it could also be a very good opportunity for us to be involved with those small businesses and providing those small grants to help them to be successful and grow. We currently do that with the ArtSock Creative Program. Those retail units along ArtSock that we essentially rent out at no expense for a short period of time to help them kind of stabilize and enter into the Glendale market and hopefully get a foothold here, which has been a very successful program. Tourism initiative. This is one that a little bit more of a moderate expense, but again, trying to market to visitors in the Los Angeles region. People aren't going to come and necessarily vacation in Glendale for 5 to 7 days, but we could get them to come here for a day while they're visiting Los Angeles or Santa Monica. It's a great opportunity to generate revenue for tourism. And one of the components that's come up as part of our economic development strategic plan was a tourism marketing district. So essentially, that's a bit of a self-taxing element, if you will, with our hotels that would generate revenue that then goes back into programming or goes back into initiatives or activities that are supportive of tourism and visitors. It would help us enhance activities on culturally significant holidays, things around some of the major events that we have going on now. That would require a third-party consultant. We would have to come in and take a look and check the feasibility of that, work with our local businesses, work with our local hotels to kind of set that up. That is something that we may be exploring and identifying better as part of our economic development strategic plan, which is coming up on its update here this year. We're currently reviewing RFPs for a consultant to assist in that. And then our existing concierge program, turning that into something a little more focused. This was a discussion at the last meeting where we discussed our process improvements for the department, looking at taking that group and having it focus on specific council initiatives. Maybe that's small businesses, maybe that's tenant improvements. We're still going to come back and kind of round that out as to what that focus will be, but it could also be something that could be a fee-based service for large-scale projects. While we are working towards those efficiencies within our entitlement and permitting process, there are still opportunities where this service could lend itself to generate revenue, but could also assist on those small business fronts or whatever initiative council ultimately directs us when we return. That brings better integration with our building and safety groups and planning, but also outside departments, working with GWP, working with fire, as we move those process or those permits through our entitlement process. This wouldn't necessarily require additional revenue, but we do believe it would require additional staffing if we were to turn this into a fee-based program or one that's focused on very specific initiatives that would be a council directive. Moving on to our housing group. These are largely, the plan or the proposals within this plan are largely based around additional staffing that's necessary and will be needed based on the services that are provided. Kind of a first discussion here, if you will, here at City Council, but homeless services will begin to transition into community development and part of that housing group. We believe that'll be a very important element in terms of streamlining efficiency, but also just dealing with the full life cycle issues of affordable housing, homeless services, and things of that nature. That group is also responsible for our Section 8, as well as housing development. As you are all aware, we have a number of projects under development right now in different phases, and then our housing programs such as rental rights. But with that, we're also seeing specialization in some of those services, whether that's special vouchers that we receive, compliance management, understanding that behavioral health and wraparound services are becoming increasingly important for both homeless services, but also housing. And we do feel that we are going to need additional staff in the future for this as we kind of manage these programs, integrate some of these programs into our existing portfolio. Data collection, we actually heard some comments about that earlier. We've typically had to be on a pretty responsive nature in terms of data when it comes to rental rights programs. Even if we discuss additional subsidy programs or additional services that's been requested that we come back with, we need more accurate data. We need to be able to collect this data in a real time, manage this, and be able to be more responsive. A lot of this would help reduce some of that front-loading time, if you will, in terms of trying to launch programs or to be able to be responsive. If we do look at some of these considerations of updating these programs on a frequent basis, we need to be able to collect that data, and that does need a staff member. And in discussions with homeless services preemptively before that transition to community development, that same need is there as well. So that's one of those positions that could help out on both sides, both the housing and the homeless services. So we would expect to need an additional staff member or more in the future. Project compliance and loan servicing. Again, as we continue to grow our portfolio of affordable housing developments, we need more increased monitoring of those developments, as well as identifying future investment opportunities. And we are in a very strong need of staffing, at least one staff member in that role to be able to help manage that in the housing development program. I'm going to try my best to describe some of the homeless services. I had a crash course with Arsenay a few weeks ago, but I wanted to make sure that prior to their inclusion in the community development department that we are actively considering and what we may need going forward in that 3 to 5 year plan, so that we don't miss out. One of those is a master leasing program that would obviously require coordination with our housing division, but more supportive beds, better management of resources, being able to hopefully proactively address those that may be homeless and be able to offer them at least some alternative, relatively accessible from our portfolio of housing to help get those off the streets. Assistance programs. This is going to be a larger dollar amount expense. We have concerns, and I know that we are putting together information from our department and other departments around the city of things that might be in jeopardy or of a concern currently as we see this transition in the federal government, the funding sources that are coming in place. but identifying a stable funding source for assistance programs, whether that's housing or mitigating challenges for at-risk populations. We are largely dependent on state and federal funds, so this supplemental funds or alternative funds locally or through grant programs may be necessary. This would be a larger dollar amount, but we may need that if we do see a depletion or a transition in any kind of federal or state funding. And then really looking for new partnership programs. This is more of a staffing need than anything, trying to establish stronger community partnerships, mitigating challenges for at-risk families by working with GUSD to identify those that may be at risk and finding the services and housing for them quicker. Assistance in managing the Measure A funds that are coming in starting in April 1. This is really kind of dealing with these issues is going to require more staffing at the end of the day. As we see more of these programs, more potential resources as well. It's a very lean team that will be transitioning over, about 4 staff members and an hourly, and we will need additional assistance in the future for that. Neighborhood services, some of the recommendations for the action plan here we've discussed before. So we're coming back with the consideration of what it would need, whether it's money or staffing. But some of the core functions there, code compliance, our BRC licensing, graffiti removal, animal control coordination. We've seen street vending become a big, major item that our staff has had to work with. Airbnb vacation rentals are another one that we're attempting to manage. And really having really seeing that this group needs to work beyond just 8 to 5. A lot of these issues are showing up in evening, in weekend hours. Being able to take on potentially proactive enforcement are going to be key, and council had given direction to wanting to explore some of those alternatives when we came back with a separate neighborhood services item. One of those discussions was an incentive program, and the idea behind this was to encourage code compliance. Not everything are we able to necessarily catch. Not everything do we hear about in our complaint-based system, but we still want to see full compliance, whether that's styrofoam, leaf blowers, other things that we would really like to see our businesses, our residents comply with, and essentially offering incentives that could be modest financial incentives or a marketing-based incentive. We see some cities where they essentially create a small decal and then promote businesses who are participating in that or complying with our ordinance, and being able to kind of push that out there is kind of a good faith and good actor. It'd also be positive marketing, both of our ordinances, but also those that are complying. In order to move forward with that program, we would also need additional staffing, though, to manage that. Mediation services, that was one that council expressed an interest in. Our team does spend a lot of time brokering solutions, or trying to, or not brokering solutions, but dealing with issues that are very civil in nature. It could be 2 residents that are in dispute, so they're calling and complaining about each other, and really kind of utilizing a lot of the services of the city in that process as we respond to calls, as we try to mitigate that challenge. The idea of having a mediation service could actually help with that. Somebody who's impartial, who could sit down between 2 parties, help negotiate some sort of solution, or even just a better relationship between them. Obviously, this would be non-binding, but we would like to reduce, I think, the conflict and the challenges that we find with a complaint-driven system. That is what we are. We know that poses a challenge in a lot of ways, but it also sets up some of these conflicts that hopefully something like a mediation service could help resolve. That is another program that would require additional staffing as well. And then night and weekend shifts. Currently, we are offering that in terms of using overtime funds that council authorized previously, but it really has assisted in increasing our effectiveness in non-business hours. Street vending, street performers, Airbnb, noise regulations, things of that nature. That would help relieve some of that administrative enforcement that the police are having to respond to, because we don't always have staffing available, or because we weren't enforcing night and weekends before because we didn't have the staff to do it. But it has assisted in kind of reducing street vendors returning to the same location, or even returning in general, with that more proactive enforcement. Again, we're currently utilizing that under temporary overtime, but in order to continue that program and to relieve that pressure off of staff, we do not have enough staff to be able to distribute that many additional hours across what we already have. So if we do want to continue this program, and this is probably one that we would like to see more in the near term, that would need additional staffing. And then more active enforcement. Again, we are based on complaints. In order to address some violations effectively, it would be necessary to have some staff out there, not necessarily patrolling. We've tried to move away from a more punitive approach and try to work with those that are in violation for a resolution, but we would like to be able to mitigate some of those complaints against, one business against another residence, to be able to be out there more proactively educate or stop some of these challenges early on, whether that's unpermitted construction, leaf blowers, and we need to put door hangers on residents' doors, but being able to catch some of these issues before they become a much larger problem. We do see that where it's gotten so far down a path, I would actually probably state more often with unpermitted construction than anything, being able to get out in front of that. Much like night and weekend enforcement, we would need several additional staff members for that. And then looking at our planning division.
Ask a quick question, just, so in our report, where you have this, what is it, right, go back one page. In the bottom, you have the, few people are sitting down there. A couple of them are gray, goldish color, the other two are gray. The gray ones are the number of staffing that we need?
No, this isn't intended to represent the exact number of staff. It's a scale. Small, medium, large, I guess you could say. So the two that are colored in is to represent what we would need.
Or what we would need, not what we have?
Correct. So we would need a few additional staff members. Again, we still need to refine exactly what that number is. And I also think that when, depending on the timing of these items, when we come back at the beginning of that fiscal year to make that request, it gives us the time to figure out exactly what it is and how many that we need. We have a rough idea, but.
Thank you.
And then for our planning division, that is responsible for our entitlement review, our zoning code, again, some of our main keepers of the permit counter, but we also have a long-range planning group as part of that as well. Underneath that include historic preservation and mobility planning. And with this group, one of the things that we would really like to add would be staffing for project screening. And what I mean by that, we typically refer to it as a gatekeeper internally. For example, if someone submits an application to us, that then gets put into the queue, it's assigned to somebody, and depending on the level of work that staff member has, it may be several days before they get a chance to start looking at that application, 5, 10, whatever it may be. And then they find out that application might be missing something important. Rather than waiting that additional time, let's just say the 5 to 10 day window, if we have a gatekeeper, if we have a project screener or two, we could look at that early on, and that day, that person can contact the applicant and say, you're missing something, we need you to resubmit. That would help us reduce some of those timelines. It would help us really get to work faster on some of those applications. There's other things that we have in process right now, such as our pre-application process that we're looking at as part of our entitlement or part of our process improvements, intended to short some of those timelines that we can't necessarily measure as well, or maybe get lumped into some other portions of our review process. But this is really to try to reduce the overall timeline in the queue. And my apologies, I think I left a bullet point in there from another slide on revenue for tourism. That's not the case. But it would need additional staffing. And in general, if we're going to continue to reduce these timelines, we will need to see additional staffing included for both planning and building and safety to continue to bring those down. We've seen a lot of success in that already. I was looking at some of the numbers today that we received from ISD, and we're seeing pretty much across the board drops with the exception of a handful of permits. But if we want to continue to bring that number down, it would take more staffing. As I stated, we are, for the most part, almost fully staffed, and we've kind of hit our capacity at that point, and if we want to continue to drop those numbers, it would need more team members. This one doesn't really require any staffing or money, but consultant retainers. We had a discussion around this regarding EIRs for projects, but going out, doing an RFP, getting somebody on, or getting a 3 to 4 maybe consultants that we could pull from when it comes to historic preservation work or EIRs that we can just go and grab pending their availability, and they can start working on projects. We waste a lot of time whenever we start moving forward with those with an RFP process and selecting a consultant. We expect that this could bring down, anywhere from 3, 6, 9 months, depending on the scale of the project, and it's something we would like to move forward with. Again, doesn't require any additional staffing or money. Housing element compliance, this is one that we also see as one of those more urgent needs. We need to track our existing programs. Right now, we have at least 30 programs that we need to monitor and report on to the state on a pretty regular basis. This responsibility has largely fell into our long-range planning team, though it does require the coordination of other groups. But in order to do that body of work, we are going to need to add additional staffing. This can also include the implementation of new programs as well. But this is a very heavy lift. We'll be quickly back in that cycle of having to update that housing element again soon, and having that staff would be a very essential and key element to that, to being successful. We saw some of the challenges, delays, the numbers of back and forth we had with the state before. We'd like to be able to mitigate that. Last time that was kind of patchwork together by a couple staff members working kind of a long-range capacity, but then also relying on a number of current planning staff members that really takes away from that ability to process entitlements and permits. New development standards. As we see updates in the future to our land use element, any zoning changes, we'll be having changes to our development standards as well, whether that's from council direction or just requirements we have from the state. But in order to move forward with that, we will likely need some sort of consultant help. We would like to offload that to a third party, just given that experience that they can bring to it. We've done this before with other development standards that we have created, but that is something that we'll probably need in the very near future. General plan updates. In fact, you'll be hearing about a handful of them on the 1st. You're aware of a couple of them that are already in process as well. But we're in there updating a number of general plan elements. And we still have air quality, community facilities, and historic preservation out there that are going to need to be purged, consolidated, updated, and that will require a relatively modest-sized contract from a third party. And that is something that maybe not in the next fiscal year, as we're updating a number of these already, but the following, we could see going into that body of work and needing that resource. And then just lastly, one of the things that we'll ultimately need is additional funding for various accreditations, continued education, the things that our staff need. Many of our positions, many of our professions require some sort of accreditation, highly skilled training that specializes in certain things such as building and safety, ADA, American Institute of Certified Planners. Our staff participating in housing conferences to learn and understand what are some of the newest trends. Professional development in general. Our economic development team participating in conferences that help market our city, help bring businesses here, bring tourism activity. We will need to add additional funding, obviously phased over this window of time to help support and finance that. So I know that was a lot of information to kind of put out there. Again, it was intended to be a high-level synopsis of some of these. All of our division heads are present if there are certain initiatives that you have questions about that you would like to dig a little bit deeper into. But based on council direction, what we would be looking for is which of these would you like to move forward with, and a relative idea of when within that 3 to 5 year window you'd like to see it move forward. We would refine this based on that, establish firmer timelines for implementation, and then ultimately would produce a final report and action plan that would come from that. What I've done here at the end is included kind of a color-coded system, if you will, again, near, mid, longer range, hopefully to help council make a decision. It's more of a checklist, if you will. Otherwise, that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mayor?
Would like to go first?
I have a question, just a quick one. I mean, how the hell is all this under your department? This is incredibly broad, and I don't know how you get any work done. I mean, if you just hear 5 minutes from each of these sub-departments about what's going on, I mean, Mr. City Manager, do you think, is it too big to fail, or what are, It's a huge amount
Right.
of, I
Mayor.
mean, it's crazy.
Right.
I knew this before when, a few months ago when we talked about that, but it's just an incredibly broad, sometimes, you know, non-compatible, non-parallel types of services that are provided. You know, housing and planning and code enforcement and, you know, all these other things. So I'm kind of blown away. That's all I want to say. It's like incredible. How do you manage him to manage all that?
Good point, valid points, Councilmember Najarian. Obviously, CDD is one of our largest departments, one of our busiest departments with a myriad of different activities. I do believe there are synergies between different divisions. I share your concern. That's part of the reason that Mr. Calvert and I are in constant communication as to potential for restructuring. And part of the plan, depending on council's direction, is going to be how do we add these new services without overloading certain divisions, and are there opportunities for restructuring within the department, within the divisions, and even perhaps with other departments. But that's a valid point. I've always maintained that CDD has a lot on their plate. That's very true.
Have you reviewed all these suggestions that were made by?
Yes,
They're
Mr.
valid on the surface, they're all valid, and you've vetted them. The only thing we don't have is the money to pay for everything that is needed.
That is correct. Mr. Calvert and I, actually, Mr. Calvert shared all of these ideas before having them printed. But when you see it in print, absolutely right. That's a lot that's being
Almost,
done in
you know,
that
it's
department.
intimidating in a certain respect.
Yeah,
So
and-
you're asking us today, you've got this little worksheet to sort of set our priorities as to what we'd like and the time frame in which we'd like them
Correct.
to come into effect.
A rough time frame, like as Mr. Calvert noted, we're not asking for a specific time frame. That will have to be refined further. There's a lot of discussion and conversation that goes on that will get us there. But obviously, we can't. Not all of these are high priority. We don't have the funding for all of these initiatives and proposed plans and program. But we like to take it in a measured way in phases to make this department successful.
And we'll see these in the budget
Part-
study at some point?
Yes, at
Fits in.
minimum, phase one will be part of the budget again after refinement between Mr. Calvert and me.
Okay, I'll defer to my colleagues.
I just kind of want to go off of what Councilmember Najarian commented. Mr. Calvert, I spoke to you about this, I guess, during the staff briefing, but again, my understanding was that during the last financial budget sessions, one of the conversations was, how do we get more support for you? Recognizing the amount that is in each of your departments, and especially when it comes to permitting and processing, how we also manage our own expectations of the things that we're expecting from you and from your staff, given the resources that you have. During that session, it was said that that item specifically was going to be coming in September, then it was going to be coming in December, and then I was under the impression that the plan that was coming in front of us today was going to be like your specific asks for those. My concern just throughout all of this has been, I think these are amazing programs and I would want us to go through and identify but I feel like we're wasting year after year going through these documents that you bring, and then we go through our budget sessions, and then we're, during the budget session, we say, well, we need another report, and that gets kicked down the line, and then now we're at the next budget session, and you still don't have the resources you need. And the truth of the matter is, I have actually reached a point where I see the amount of work you and your staff do, where when I get complaints from residents and business owners about how long their permit's taking or what the process is, I don't even have the room to come and be upset because I recognize that the amount that's there, right? And so, I've continuously said, like, help us help you, right? And get you the resources that you need, because without those resources, you've made a lot of structural changes, and I recognize that a lot of the stuff that when it comes to codes and cleaning up the codes and processes are also part of a process that we're going through, that you keep bringing in buckets for us to clean up. But what I don't want to end up with is come now the budget session, and during the budget session, we have still not clearly identified, we haven't walked away from that budget session giving you the resources that you need on some of these priority items that have been very clear for the last 2-3 years. And so that then gets, again, dragged on to another report and another report. So, I would love for us to figure out, there's a lot here. You're really good at guiding us on how you want to frame the conversation, so we walk away with giving you clear direction or staff clear direction on what you see as the priority and the timelines. But again, I think at least I know that some of the council members have also shared in their concern about timelines, but I can't expect anything when I'm not giving you the resources. So can you speak to that and why that was left out and this is here now?
A couple points I would make to that. Again, I kind of stated earlier, I think it would be relatively reckless in some regards for us to just walk up and say, I definitively need this number of staff members to start doing, or to do all of these things. An example I would give is that what I would like to come away with firmly from council today is, what are the things that you would like to see us put into place immediately from this list? Because that's where we'll come back in this next budget session, say, look, I'm going to need this number of staff, or I may need this level of funding. The reason to not put all the numbers on the staffing there today and rather waiting until that session is that, let's take neighborhood services, for example. We're already doing weekend and night enforcement through overtime. From my perspective, council may provide different direction. That's something we would want to keep going into the next year for sure. And let's just say that requires 3 staff members to do it. But then council says, later on down the line, we'd like to do active enforcement, proactive enforcement. During that time frame, maybe in the 2-year window, the need for that evening and weekend enforcement reduces, right? We start getting better at vending, street vending. We see less complaints for noise. Maybe I don't need to add another 3 to do proactive. Maybe I can rely on that staff that's already there, trying to make sure that we're being efficient, that we're not overestimating the number of bodies that we need. What I would say, if we're looking across other divisions and groups, our data has just shown irrefutable evidence that our permit timelines are dramatically dropping. I know that there's going to be complaints. There's going to be things that go wrong from time to time, whether it's on our end or someone else's, but we are seeing reductions, significant reductions. 15.5% accessory dwelling units in the last 6 months of last year to the year before. 27.7% for an electrical permit for multifamily, condo, and commercial, 26% for single-family residential. They're coming down. That doesn't mean I don't need or want more staff, but I think it's as those things start to settle and we go through more of these process improvements, we may see less things that we review, right? We have express permits, we have instant permits we put into place. Maybe we don't need quite as many as I would say today as some of those things go into place. So I think it's more of a phased approach. Let's maybe add a couple here, and then a couple years later, a year later, we see how that's played out, and maybe we add more through other programs. I don't think coming in and I would like you to give me 50 staff members and $60 million for projects would be a responsible way for us to go about that. So if we can identify the things that are most important that we would bring back for that discussion this fiscal year, and then we start to build on that through the rest of these. And there I'd just be seeking more of input of, what's kind of a mid or longer term in that 3 to 5 year window.
So that initial conversation was specifically on streamlining and permitting. It was specifically on those items. And I think part of that report was also going to include how CDD is going to be working with Glendale Water and Power and Public Works and looking at some ways to restructure that. Again, at what point do we see that report?
That's going to be something separate. That's something we're going to have to plan out. We've been before council where we have now folded things like low-impact development review into our department. If we're going to consider that with things electrical or water review, those are plans that we still need to continue to put forward. We have a number of things already in motion. There's only so many, I guess, of those process improvements that can be done at once, regardless of how much staff we have. And as I stated before, we just kind of got to a point now where we are relatively fully staffed up now, and we can see how this plays out before we go and start grabbing a fistful of more staff members to add in there, because we're still seeing those reductions. We have seen the work levels level off. They could still be better, but that's also why we're here today, to identify where those spots are. We could add members to the team.
And I would add, if I may, Mayor Satrian, yes, these things have taken a bit of time to process and bring forward, but this was a measured, phased approach. Like Mr. Calvert mentioned, at the time, last year, we had a number of vacancies that have since been filled. 2 years ago, when we started this process, we had some staffing members who were close to retirement and left. We brought in new staff, and they're trained. They are more productive, in my opinion. Mr. Calvert noted two words, reckless and irresponsible. I would say the easiest, simplest way would be just to ask for additional bodies and additional personnel. That's not always the answer to process improvement. My ask and my response to every department has been, in order to improve your processes, what does it take? Your first reaction should not be, let's add staff. Is there automation we can use, like they have done in building and safety and planning with Intergov, the digital submittal that has helped the situation? Is there opportunity, like you mentioned, to consolidation with other departments? So these conversations are continuous during the year, and we have reached a point that we have, with certain degree of certainty, I should say, that at least for phase one, we know bringing on 2, 3, 4, 5 number of new staffing will help us get to what this council would like to see, and that'll be part of the budget review process. And quite frankly, we have competing interests from other departments. Other departments do also ask for additional staffing, and it's my fiduciary responsibility to inform the council so that you have that big picture perspective as where we stand before we approve personnel additions.
Councilman Brotman.
Yeah, thanks for all this. The idea of going one by one and all of us giving you our priorities on all these items, I just think is impractical. We would be here for the next 2 hours. Might I suggest that we set up some individualized briefings? We can then, like we've done on so many other things, we can go through, could tell you where we are. You get a sense of where the council is. You work on whatever the proposals you're going to bring in the next budget, right? And then take it from there, because I don't think we could do this on the dais. It's not possible. Or if we have to do it on the dais, let's schedule a special session when we're not doing anything else, because this is going to take hours.
This is a lot of work that you guys put into this.
I mean, I'm just thinking myself of going through this list of all the things, and you guys are going to just throw me out the window after I, spend a half an hour on all the thoughts I have on this. It's not going to work.
If I could I would just note for the record, doing it via individual briefings can be problematic. So if you want to have a separate session, you should talk about that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it has to be
Can I
separate.
ask on the process on that? Because I'm still, after all these years, not clear on that. Because sometimes we get these individual briefings way ahead, we give input, and then, an item then later comes to council. And I can actually point to even some that have been with some city attorneys. Yvette has been coming in with, housing staff or whatnot, for even like the ADUs. and getting feedback on housing, and then sometimes you guys say, we can't do this. So which one is it? And what defines that?
Sure, Madam Mayor. So the purpose of individual briefings, obviously, is to provide an update or brief on a subject matter, allow council members to ask questions. But in terms of then providing feedback or direction through briefings, that's where there's potential issues under the Brown Act. I can't speak to every situation. Sometimes it's just, even if there's feedback given, it's sort of taken in, but that feedback can't be used to develop a concurrence or develop a staff recommendation. That's where, I get a little concerned when we're taking direction in that manner.
Well, could we do this? Could we have these sessions, we ask questions, we give our thoughts, then kind of some summary of this is brought to us to then deliberate and give specific direction back on what should be going into the budget?
It's still problematic to do it that way.
And maybe this,
Can you walk us through the details and let's figure out how, I think you see where the issue lies.
Sure.
I'm looking for a solution from you.
Madam Mayor, members of council, so again, the briefings can occur, the questions, even some feedback, but I might start to become concerned if that feedback is then used to develop a staff recommendation based on the feedback that the account staff received. So, especially on policies matters such as this, including budget and funding. So certainly, the briefings can be used by staff to get ready for the next session and be ready, knowing ahead of time kind of where the council's headed in terms of questions, but they can't come in terms of, hey, here are, we heard from 3 council members that you favor this project, that sort of thing. That's where it becomes a problem. So my recommendation would be either do the briefings and then bring a separate session, or just do a separate session to get more feedback. And maybe council has some preliminary feedback on some of the items so that staff can be ready for the next time we bring this to you.
Madam Mayor, if I may make a couple of suggestions so today's session is somewhat productive. We can ask Mr. Calvert as to, in his opinion, what he thinks is the high priority near-term initiatives that we should put in place, so we can include those in the budget review process, or we can leave it up to council members to, based on the list, as opposed to going every single line item, direct staff with 3, 4, 5 initiatives that are your highest priority. And then we'll schedule another meeting after the budget process.
Is this color-coded, by the way? I mean, are the important ones any special color, or?
near term is the green, things that we think should be ideally in the next fiscal year, shortly thereafter. Orange and red is really kind of pushing that further out. Maybe if we're, let's say 5-year plan, orange is 2 to 3, red's 4 to 5.
So green are the stars, the stars are the green?
The stars are the things I think are absolutely urgent. Those are things that we have to be moving towards regardless. We don't really have much of an option with them. And we're going to need those resources to do it. And then other ones are just, we know are a high priority. If I'm looking at what's on the screen now, the enhanced communications, right? We know we need better public outreach. We know that we need that.
And we know that's council priority.
Yes. So I think the funding to go into producing that, not the staffing yet, that may be something that comes the following year. But we know we're going to need financial resources to move that forward. Seismic retrofit, that is a matter of safety. That is something that all of our peers have done, or they're in the process of doing, and we have not. So that is something that needs to move forward for sure. We've identified a lot of opportunities around foreign direct investment. We've already received direction on Focus Concierge. I would say that program is going to start moving forward as part of process improvement, but maybe the staffing isn't needed until the following year. I can go through each of the green ones right now if you'd like and kind of give that feedback if that is productive.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
may I speak?
Sure.
So, I agree with my colleagues who have mentioned that this is a heavy set of items. I enjoyed going through this. I just don't know if today was a day or an adequate time for us to have the quite thorough discussion needed on each of these items. And I think a special separate meeting earlier in the day is warranted for us to go into this one by one. I will say this as just my overarching comments that I do have one question. When you said that there are some permits, you've had drops in times spent on permits, and you said there are some that have not gone down. What types of permits have we not experienced any reduction in time of issuance?
The past 6 months, we have seen a slight uptick in the multifamily and condominiums. This is, right now, I'm just looking at building and safety side. We're still going through some of the planning numbers. Building combo for single family, fences and walls were the ones that primarily saw some sort of increase, relatively modest, between 5 and 7%.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think that ultimately, and for me, there's a couple of things that do stand out, I think are immediate urgent concerns. Obviously, enforcement of our existing rules to ensure that public health and safety are a priority and are protected in terms of the proliferation of street vendors. I have seen a drop in the amount of illegal pop-up establishments. I would like to continue to see that, and I think that it's one of those things where if we hammer away at it either periodically or for a sustained period of time, the message goes out that this is not acceptable. And I don't know if you were going to need a continuous outlay of resources, whether it's staff or anything else. And whatever happens here, I do appreciate that, for instance, you're speaking to community development, you're speaking with our community services and parks in terms of the homeless and the unhoused. We need that across all our divisions, police as well. Sometimes they're going to be able to be on scene for something that when your staff is not, their needs, we're right now, staffing wise, we're in all hands on deck situation. I know we approved additional hiring of police officers, but I don't know how we are going to move forward adding staff when we don't have funds to pay for additional staff. That's a major concern for me, and it should be a major concern for everyone in this room, watching on television, following us online. We got to figure out how to pay for the stuff that we need. A few years back, and perhaps Councilmember Najarian or perhaps even Mr. Galanian or Garpetian can remember when the city went through a major contraction of staffing. There was almost a 25% reduction of the city staffing. That was not done on a whim. It was done specifically for a reason, because we were looking at a financial abyss, and the best solution for it was to hand these golden handshake retirements to individuals to get them off the books. Now what we see is we're not only trying to bring back staffing levels, and it may be warranted, but it's not a sustainable model for doing so. So that's my main concern. So we have to figure out a couple of things. One is we need to work smarter, not harder. We got to figure out how we're going to do things in a way that doesn't add bodies and dollars to our bottom line as a city. And furthermore, number one for your department, Mr. Calvert, and for anyone else listening, is that we need to reduce the amount of time that residents, stakeholders, businesses spend in queue, in process for permit issuance. That's the only thing that really matters. In terms of what we're doing in terms of trying to attract tourists here or new businesses, everything comes down to the basic factor of how easy it is to do business in this city. If we make it simple, streamlined, quick turnaround, not 3, 4, 5 resubmittals and then waiting for 3 months at a time. If businesses know that they can come and they can get their business opened in 6 months from issuance to ribbon cutting, word will spread across the county, the region, the state. That should be our number one goal, to make sure that people's permits are being issued in a reasonable amount of time, because time ultimately at the end of the day is money. It may not be our money, it may be the applicant's money, but it's still money, and it impacts our bottom dollars here as terms of revenue, getting people into our stores, getting people into their homes, et cetera. So, we need to, I like a good quote. To quote John Wooden, the great Wizard of Westwood, we need to be quick but not hurry. We need to be precise and not sloppy. We need to make sure that when people come in through that door and we tell them that they're going to expect a turnaround on their permit, that we hold ourselves to that commitment and issue that. And I personally have heard far too many stories. I mean, the one thing that I think probably every council member on this dais has is a story of a resident or a business who gets caught up in the gears of our processes, either through their fault or no fault of their own, and it causes major, major delays. I don't want to go into specifics, but I'm happy to go over that with you privately. That's all.
Councilor Garpetian?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, thank you for the very comprehensive report. It's very informational to know what problems every department has and what the needs are, because we usually get the complaints part from the residents, but not from the staff side. So I think for me, I agree with Councilman Kasakian that having the staff in place after hours or after hours to enforce the vendors laws that we have. So we will enforce all laws basically. If you have an expediting process, I think many people will use it, but we need to have companies that are, I don't know how we choose them, the third-party companies that do the plan check for us, and therefore we pay the expediting fee. I think they have to be kind of close, so if you want to deliver a plan, they can get a messenger and do it in a couple of hours instead of taking too long for the plans to go back and forth. I get the same complaints, and Mr. Calvert gets phone calls from me once or twice a week, if not more, that such and such project, they have this issue, what's going on with it, and why is it taking long? And this is what we hear every day. Probably on the DRB side, we used to have 2 DRBs, and they met every other week, so we had more DRB meetings. I don't know if that is an issue or not. Also, collaboration between different departments. This is a very large department, and they have different components in there. I think sometimes I hear that there's a project submitted, and one department uploaded their comments, but the other ones haven't done so. But the applicant cannot open that one section of that uploaded comments, so they can work on it until the rest of them come in. I think we need to look into that. Some of the pre-applications are issues because we spend so much time with some of the applicants. It's a pre-application, but they end up not submitting those applications, and we lose a lot of time on it. I think shortening the timelines is the key for all of us. I don't know how we're going to get there, but I think that's the most important issue. And as far as seismic retrofitting, what is the time? Is this a state mandate, or it's just a voluntarily action that they have to take, or we are taking?
We could see it evolve into a state mandate, but we do see it as a public safety concern and issue, given the number of buildings that fall under that category.
So it's not a state mandate yet.
No.
It's not, yeah, because I remember that state had a mandate on industrial properties that were either brick or some sort of a built with not reinforced masonry material, and they had a mandate until 92 or 98 to have them retrofitted. But I know that there was a huge lobbying in Sacramento from the engineering companies to push some of these requirements. And when we go back, and we are all for safety, there's no doubt about that. When we go back and try to hire consultants, I like us to look into who are we hiring, and I wouldn't want to hire the consultants that were pushing this agenda in Sacramento. And the buildings that are kind of maybe identified or not identified, you mentioned there are 1,000 properties. Are these the ones that are mostly apartment buildings, or they are just single-family homes as well?
No, we've identified likely about 1,000 residential buildings. That could be a mix of either one, but one of the biggest challenges are those that have tuck under parking, and that challenge of
They are
pancaking.
cantilevered, over the parking structures. And when I went through this, I just counted 24 employees that we needed based on this report, based on the gold ones, and I'm sure it could be more. And the pages that didn't have employees that were needed. They had consultants that we had to hire to achieve some of these goals. But for me, I'm in line with Councilmember Kasaki on that. First and foremost, shortening the time for permitting process. I think that's the biggest challenge we have. And some of the fees, that's what I wanted to get to. Some of the fees that will pay or residents pay, I think I mentioned this once before, that if it's a storage structure or if it's a garage structure and they're in front of the property and they're visible from the street, the fees that they paid was equal to a full design review. If you're building a brand new house and full design review fees. I don't know if you have we're kind of can separate these or calculate it differently. It's something that maybe we need to look into, because that takes huge, it's like $6,700 or $7,200, and it's kind of excessive for a very small addition or I don't know, a garage project. Oh, and also the system that we have between CDD and fire department approval, public works approval, as well as some cases GWP review and approval. I think that's where sometimes the delays come in play. I think we need to collaborate a little bit more with the other departments so we can all be on the same page and maybe see each other's projects and see who is approved it, who hasn't approved it yet, and make it easier for everyone. So those are my comments for today.
Sure.
Okay, I'll make a go at it. Let me start by saying I agree with the work that we're doing on enforcement, the nights, weekends. I would like it to be not just particular ordinances, but all of our ordinances that we are addressing, that we are making sure that there's compliance with our rules. The rules are there for a reason, and as I've said many times, I'm not looking to lean in with a punitive approach first, but there are some individuals that will not respond until they see their cage rattled a little bit. So we need to have that in our toolkit. So that's one. Agree wholeheartedly with the idea that the permit and entitlement process needs to be streamlined and needs to be faster and easier for our residents and our businesses to get through. And we all, yes, I hear the complaints too. And I can't judge whether they're fewer now than there were really, but it still seems like we have work to do. Some other things here, I think communications are really important. I think we are kind of losing the narrative because we don't have people that can tell the story of what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. That may be around making a walkable city, that may be around housing and density and why these things are important. So I think I'm very happy that we have Kevork now and others on communications, and I really think that needs to be taken very seriously. I will also say on the housing side, getting the data is really the first and the most important thing for us to do. If we can't measure it, if we don't know what our problem is, we can't make policy and we can't fix it. So we need the data. We need to understand where are we with vacancies, where are we with evictions and rent evictions and rents and rent burdens and things like that. We absolutely need that information. And then I would say, anything that streamlines our process. So sometimes you have to spend some money up front, but you're going to get kind of a long-term payoff because you're going to streamline and remove steps that are maybe redundant. So anything we can do in the automation area, introducing AI into any of our processes, I think it's worth taking, putting some resources into things like that. Because ultimately, as Councilmember Kasakian said, we can't just keep throwing money at these problems. We have to figure out how to do things better and do more with less. and wholeheartedly agree that we need to figure out our long-term financial strategy to pay for all the things that our residents want and that we believe are needed for the city to be a highly functional city. So that, I'll look to Mr. Galanian for that, because the financial side is concerning to me. And I guess the last thing I'd say is to Councilmember Najarian's point about your scope being so broad. I will make a plug about something that it's no secret that I've for a long time felt that we need to have a Department of Transportation. We need to pull all the transportation functions from CDD, from Public Works, and merge them so that we can get some focus on those very, very complex issues. And I think now that CDD is taking on kind of our homeless services and our continuum of care, it even makes that situation more dire for you, Mr. Calvert, and I think really puts more spotlight on the need for us to do some restructuring like that, because you do have too many things under your umbrella. So just the last thing I have, as I've been scribbling notes here, is our general plans. I know we do have to update our land use plan, and I think that's going to be important for us to continue to meet our housing targets, our production targets that are state mandates. So I would think we can't just leave off the table the update of our land use element. So I would put a priority check mark on that. And I think that covers everything.
Councilmember Brotman, we are in the process of updating the land use element now, so you'll see that come back here in the coming months.
Okay. That's what I would say. There's plenty of other stuff on here that I think is great and I think we need to do. I've been a long supporter of getting, and I think it was Councilmember Kasakian's idea originally to get an ombudsman in place to do mediation. I think that's a really great thing. I don't think that's a heavy lift, but, and we're talking about the big stuff, that's not going to make the first cut.
So I'm just going to go down the list on the greens, okay, and just say yes, no, yes, no. Is that helpful? Okay, enhanced communications, yes. Seismic retrofit, yes. Foreign direct investment, no. Focused concierge, yes. Compliance tracking and loan servicing, that doesn't sound urgent to me, so I'm going to say no on that. Night weekend shifts, yes. Project screening, yes. Consultant retainers, yes. Housing element compliance. Well, we did that already, didn't we? I mean, wasn't our housing element approved just last year or the year before?
It was, but there are about 30 programs in that housing element that need consistent reporting, information gathering, monitoring, things of that nature, implementation in some cases.
Okay, all right, you convinced me, yes. Development standards, yes. That's it. Right? That's it. I mean, there's only about 10, so.
Good job.
I'm sorry, you have more comments? Yeah, okay, sure, go ahead,
We all
yeah.
made comments, but we're going over the list. I think I'm gonna, sorry?
Go ahead. No, he wants to go through the list. No, we thought you all made comments, so.
Yeah, we made
okay,
comments,
he
but we
chose
all
to Go
went-
through the list. That's
Okay,
all.
we're going
Okay,
through
but
the
you
list.
go ahead and go through.
Okay. So I'm gonna tell you which ones I'm not in favor of in green, so you know which, it's easier this way. Consulting retainers, I'm not that hot about that, but,
I'm sorry, Councilmember Garpetian, can you go from the top
From
of
the
the
beginning,
page?
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, enhanced communications, yes. Seismic retrofit, yes. Foreign direct investment, no. Focused concierge, yes. Tracking and loan, what is this compliance tracking and loan servicing? That's something that,
It's need for additional staff members to deal with some of the financial implications of our housing development programs, as well as identifying new opportunities.
I don't know what that is, so I'm gonna.
Can you be more clear?
I don't believe Mr. Forney's here today. Mr. Zovak, is it something you could expand on a little bit for council?
Mr. Calvert, we are planning to bring this item back. I don't want this to.
That's fine. I'll abstain on that one. Just night, weekend shifts,
I do want to have a special session on this, so.
neighborhood services, yes, for night and weekend shifts. But I don't want the inspectors to go knock on people's doors like 10 o'clock at night. That's something that we don't want to do. But as far as enforcing everything else, that's good. Project screening, yes. Consultant retainer, yes. Housing element compliance, yes. Development standards, yes. And one other thing I'd like to mention quickly is, as far as customer service that we have, I know we have a rule in place that when people call, you have 3 days to return their phone calls. I think if we cut that shorter, if we can, it will be much helpful for people not to get frustrated and keep calling back. Because if you get a call on a Wednesday, a third day is a Saturday if you have 72 hours to return people's phone calls. So it will, pile up on you on Monday. It's difficult to return everyone's phone calls of 3 days. So that's one other thing maybe we should consider on streamlining the process.
All right. The permitting and timelines would be at number one. I think you spoke about DRB, Councilmember Garpetian and Kasakian. I think you have something in the process that, like in your buckets, that you're supposed to bring back for the streamlining related to DRB and HPC and how we clean that up. And so,
Mayor and council members, I would say just about everything that's been listed here in terms of improving, reducing timelines is already in that bucket. That's what we discussed last November as part of phase 2 of the streamlining process.
okay. Yes to the nights and weekends. I understand right now you have it out on overtime, so whatever you need to make. And I do believe you already have a list of what the council and this council found as priorities of what to use those for. The tenant improvements, yes. The foreign direct investment, the one comment I have, because I saw Sister Cities on there, because we now have a part-time Sister Cities staff member, I think it would be worthwhile for EDD just to connect with the staff member. Just today I saw that like Santa Anita is doing an expo with one of their sister cities as an event for the business community. I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and so maybe we can kind of start there for the investments. But I think before we go to foreign investments, there's a lot of opportunities, I think, of bringing business from other cities to Glendale, and I would love to see us put more effort into that. But I also recognize that also goes in line with how quickly we can actually turn permits around, because we can go and promise the world to the business, but they're always going to look to how quickly they can open their doors. So I know that's something that I've heard time and again from even restaurants that are on the west side that are looking to leave, that, they don't like the environment there anymore, but their number one question is how quickly can I open my restaurant in Glendale? So it doesn't help our EDD team when that process is too long. Yes to the retrofit, yes to the focused concierge, yes to the enhanced communication. Compliance tracking and loan servicing, sure. The project screening, I thought you already had that as the part of the pre-application, Mr. Calvert.
No, this is when the actual application is submitted and put into the queue.
Okay.
We would like to be able to evaluate, we would like to have staff members dedicated to evaluating that to make sure that it is a complete package rather than finding out maybe a week or two later.
Okay. Yes to the development standards. I think that's, I just went through the greens. I'm not even looking at the other ones. And then I think I don't want to minimize the work that went into this action plan, and I don't want us to rush through. So would you like for us to do a special session as a council, or would you like to do individual briefings and then schedule an afternoon session?
If council would like to go over these in individual briefings to discuss more in details, we could do that and then come back for another session.
Okay, I also recognize that our budget sessions are coming up, so if we need to make ourselves available, like, please don't hold off. I know you guys have timelines to meet for your budget sessions, so if you need us to make certain decisions, so you know what you're bringing to the budget sessions, make sure these are scheduled in advance of that. Okay. Anything else? Oh, we have a caller.
Beth Brooks, you have 3 minutes. Beth, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time because I know you guys have to have a. Just as a member of the public who really, doesn't know much about how you do the budgets, I'm just trying to figure out if you have a budget of, I don't know what it is, 1.23 or 1.27, whatever it is, budget, how do we not have enough money to hire more bodies to get everything done on this list from Mr. Calvert? Because everything seems very critical. Because as a member of and also how much input has the public given into that list of things that Mr. Calvert believes we need for the city? How much input has the public given regarding that? I just think we're kind of in the dark. I don't really know how things work really with the budget. I just know there's a lot of money. I just don't know where it's all going. Like, for instance, I'll see something that's coming up on the Arts and Culture Commission or whatever it's called, and, $40,000 for somebody to study how to better represent different cultures with arts in our city. Like, why do we not have somebody, who could be hired on this list that Mr. Calvert is saying that we would need, but you're spending $40,000 to hire somebody to give you input on what kind of art to put in the city? It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm trying to figure out what the priorities are and how you make decisions about how to spend the money, and also how to involve the public more in these decisions, because I think you definitely need staff, to handle everything that's going to go on with housing, especially now that you're going to put, homeless services under the housing division. So I just don't understand how you're making decisions, and I don't think I think the public needs to know, where's the money going? And if there are nice to haves, you should take the money from the nice to haves and give it to the must haves. And it seems to me that almost everything on his list, almost everything is a must have. And I think that you just have to talk to the people who got money in the budget, who really, at this point, maybe this year, should give up that money and be put into a general, fund that can be used for things we really must take care of. And of course, that I believe one of those things is rental assistance. And also, I think you need more staffing at the Housing Authority and definitely at the Renters' Rights Program, because I think that's going to explode. Okay, and I feel bad for all you guys, because I think you work very, very, very hard. And I know you're doing your best, and I know that I get down on you, and I want to apologize.
Thank you, Beth.
Sure.
Madam Mayor, no more callers.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Close. We have closed session.
Oh.
Madam Mayor, we are live.
Welcome to the Glendale City Council meeting. May we have roll call?
Councilmember Brotman,
Here.
Garpetian,
Here.
Kasakian,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Mayor Al-Sadria.
Here. May we have your report?
One is closed session. 1A, conference with labor negotiators. The city designated negotiators attending the closed session is Mayor Ellen Al-Sadrian. The unrepresented employee positions are city manager and city attorney.
We're actually going to be having a really long night session. I'm going to ask if we can move this item to the next meeting for closed session.
Sure, we were just,
I recognize, but I know it's, I mean, we have, I think, hundreds of people outside, so.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.